Welcome to the Practice Accelerator Podcast, powered by Blue Camel. This podcast is all about the business of dentistry. We talk to dentists from all over to hear stories of what works. The ups and downs provide you guidance for your own practice journey. Whether you're an associate thinking of starting a practice, own one practice, or many, our goal is to help you succeed in the business of dentistry.
All right, super excited today. It's May 28th and we've got Dr. Sukhman Chauhan here. We are excited to have her as a guest of the Practice Accelerator Podcast. We're talking about rural practices, small town practices, and Dr. Chauhan is super passionate about her practice, and she intentionally chose a rural or small town practice to make a difference. So welcome to the show, Dr. Chauhan.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And so a little background about Dr. Chauhan. She graduated in 2008 from dental school in India and moved to Canada a couple of years after graduation and successfully completed the dental program at the University of Toronto. And then after graduation, she worked in the Greater Toronto area and Northern Ontario, which provided her a lot of opportunity to work with people from diverse cultures and backgrounds. And coming from a smaller town in India, she always wanted to settle down in a smaller community away from the busy lifestyle of the Toronto area. So Dr. Sukhman really loves dentistry, and she often refers to the dental office as her happy place. She's passionate about helping her patients improve their oral health by spending the time to know them better and understand their needs. She understands that dental visits can be stressful and always does her best to make them as comfortable as possible. And she talks about her personal experience, and you'll get some of that in today's show with patients, and likes to hear about their unique experiences. And she's excited to get involved in the community that she's in. And she's raising her family in Muskoka. So with that little intro, Dr. Sukhman Chauhan, thank you so much for joining the Practice Accelerator Podcast today. And really excited to dive into maybe a non-traditional topic, but folks that are thinking, dentists that are either associates, new associates, young associates, or maybe associates for a long time, and all have only been focused on, oh, I will have a practice in a big city, and may have not considered a rural or small town practice. Why did you, I know that your passion and your background, having grown up in a small city, can you elaborate a little bit of why the rural or small city practice, and do you still love it? And is it still something that you recommend for folks?
Yes, Arvind. So thank you for asking that question, having me here. So basically, even though I was in small town in India, and at the back of my head, I always liked that community feel where you know people. And I think that was really important for me. But the choice of moving to a smaller town did not come right away. I had already moved from India to Canada. So that was a big move for me and my family. And then we were living in Brampton. So I think we did not initially think that we would move away. Once again, we'll change our home. But like my initial office was just 10-minute drive from my home, like where I was associating. So, but after about working for almost 2 years, I realized that it does not match the lifestyle that I had envisioned for myself and my family. I was working evenings and weekends, and even though I was closer to home, I did not get enough family time. And that's when I really started looking at opportunities outside GTA. And then I came across a great opportunity in Northern Ontario. And the plan was that I would start working there and see if I like it. And then eventually my family would follow me there.
Oh,
but somehow, but somehow the move never happened for us for different personal reasons.
Yeah.
So I ended up traveling for work almost on weekly basis. I was taking a flight up there on Monday evenings and then flying back on Thursday. So that's what I kept doing for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
I know. And even though it sounds like a lot of work, but I think it worked really well for me because I still got 4 days with my family instead of working till 7 and the weekends. So I had more time to myself. And I think I really like that. Also, I enjoyed the interpersonal relationships with people and other team members. Being in a smaller community just forced us closer to each other as a team. And I kind of like that office environment. So it was basically a great experience overall.
That's very cool. Interesting. I didn't think about that. It wasn't necessarily a business decision. It was a lifestyle decision. Like wherever you're going to be in terms of setting up a practice, you had the experience. It sounds like 2 years is quite a lot of experience being in the GTA, Greater Toronto area, bigger city,
Yes.
working evenings and weekends and being honest with yourself and saying that, hey, this is actually not what I envisioned for myself. And so that's some self-reflection I imagine that you did. And then
Right.
spending some time thinking about what matters to me. You're passionate
Mhm.
about dentistry and you want to have a family, you want to have a home life. How can you have both? In that possibility, what can you create? I love that. It's so authentic and real. And I think maybe folks are just looking for a practice, but you're really centered on how do you win at everything? And then the other thing is, I really respect that you flew down for a number of years to check out the practice, embed yourself in the community. That's a real commitment. And versus like, oh, I'll try for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, maybe 3 months. I would see some people saying, okay, I need to give 3 months. You went through 2 fiscal
Mhm.
years with the practice to see if you like it and really committed to the community. It sounds like you committed before you knew it. You had already
So the thing was that I did not end up staying in that particular community.
okay.
But that was the plan. Like I wanted to give it my 100%, but it was just like 7-hour drive from GTA, and I have part of my family here as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I did not give it 30 days. It was actually very surprising. I was associating there in an office, and when I left, like just how time flies, and nobody
Yeah.
could believe that it has already been 2 years,
Totally.
and I had done that for 2 years. Which now I think about it, I don't know how I did it, but it just at that time it was fine.
The thing is, I really got to take my hat off to you and point out to you that that's what dentists that own their own practice are entrepreneurs. And whether you like it or not, if you're thinking about going from an associate to having your own practice, you are an entrepreneur. You are a small business owner, and successful small businesses run experiments. They do test and learn. They're figuring things out. And you really did that. You really, hands down, you went out and tested it. And with definitive evidence, I would say after 2 fiscal years, you would know that, okay, maybe it's not the 7-hour practice, but
Yes.
definitively I can say a small town practice, rural practice, perhaps if I can be 2 hours within the GTA, outside of the GTA, I would do that. And so coming to that conclusion, I think personally, like we work with startups and small businesses and on the digital side and non-digital. And what we see is having a proof of concept is so important before you start dumping in all of your life savings into an idea and you're married to some type of an idea or a vision without validating it. And so there's no question that you validated this for yourself, the idea of a rural practice. I don't know if 2 years is for everybody, but I think the lesson here for folks that are listening today is that really validate whether you're thinking about an internal, like a big city practice or a rural practice or any type of niche practice, really get your feet wet and get a sense of it like you did. I think that's a huge lesson for folks.
Yes, and I agree, because I think it just gives you a perspective of what you like and what you don't. It's one thing to listen to other people's experience and then make your decisions based on that, but it is very different when you actually do it.
Yeah,
So like everybody would has a different personality and they want different things. So they would give you their opinion based on what works for them.
totally.
But if you are considering even a little bit, I think it's always better to try it out. And like after working there for 2 years, it was no brainer. It was an easy choice for me. And when I started looking for my practice, I knew that it's not going to be GTA.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's, as you said, 2 hours. That was a sweet spot for me.
Oh, nice.
And and then I just wanted something that would provide me with that kind of lifestyle choices. Now I come home by 5. There are no weekends.
Amazing.
I actually work 3.5 days a week.
That's a good life.
It's relaxing, it's simple. And I think that kind of work-life balance was not possible in bigger cities from what I have seen.
Wow. That's amazing. Like everyone's vision is going to be a little different. But I think, again, the underlying point is that the commitment and some time to self-reflect on what you want, and then going out and then validating that. So that you have a bias growing up in a small town, small city, that you have an affinity or a love for going back to there after experiencing it. So instead of using your past experience and saying that I know I will go back to a small city and then being surprised it's in a different country, it's not what you expect, you still validated it versus having an expectation that, hey, this is what it should be. And I think that's really important, where people who make assumptions when your assumptions are wrong really set themselves up for disappointment and possibly failure. So I can't stress that enough. I just love that kind of curiosity and the willingness and the attitude to explore and validate the idea. That's so awesome. So now that you've been in that practice for a number of years now, what are some nuances of running a rural practice from your observations working as associate within a big city practice? Can you share a little bit of your insight there?
I would say that when we are talking about nuances or disadvantages, they could also be advantages in some way.
Interesting.
I mean, I think the responsibility is just greater. Like, you're not a dentist anymore, not just a dentist anymore. You're a community person as well. So people want to see that aspect of you. I personally think it is not a disadvantage if you prefer that field. But if you're someone who likes to drop the instruments at the end of the day and go home and not be involved in community at all, I'm not sure if it will work the same way. But from a personal experience, I think you have to be out there.
So is it like you're almost like a public figure in the community?
Yes, I would say that you are a public figure to some extent. Like, you don't have to be doing everything,
right,
but you have to have some kind of a public image. And I think that's something that's really important. Like, people know you, right?
Right.
And your image outside the dental settings also play a role. I was just saying that you will meet your patients everywhere. You could meet your patients in a restaurant, a mall.
Right.
So those kind of things, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And so is that something that you learned, or is that something that you're observing that, hey, for me to be successful here in a rural small town practice, I need to be okay interacting with my patients or seeing my patients on a weekend or my days off and being social with them in these kind of high and buy instances?
So as far as my own experience is concerned, I think it just came naturally to me because I come from a smaller town. So I didn't have to necessarily learn it. But yes, I think that would be, you have to be kind of okay with it.
Right. And what does I guess for those that are listening, to clarify, if you really like to be private or unplug from the practice and anything to do with the practice outside of chair time, a rural practice may not be, you may have to deal with something in a rural or small town practice, where in a big city, you can get lost and be a bit hidden or maybe go incognito a little bit in a big city.
Yes, I think it's a little difficult to hide in a smaller place.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think that's interesting.
Yes, but I also think that to kind of offset that, your communication skills, which are an extremely important aspect of any dental offices, irrespective of it's a smaller town or a bigger city, they play a huge role. Like, if you're great while you're in a dental office, you would still, or you have to be likable, and people, I think that's one thing that could play an important role. If you don't want to be that community person, just be great dentist and just be nice to people in office. And like most of my patients come from referrals. And initially when I started, people didn't know me as much, but I was still getting people in. And they would generally have somebody who would have told them that about our office. So yes, it is important, but it's also important that, when people come in your office, how good of a dentist or what your communication skills are and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Basically, people like having a website is important, but people will still ask around before coming in.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of validate. Have you heard? Word of mouth travels fast
Yeah.
in smaller towns. Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Reputation management is critical everywhere, but especially in a smaller town where you're really embedded in the community.
Yes, because if one person had a bad experience, it could mean that you lose 10 more potentials, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they are going to talk.
Yeah, versus say a larger town, you've got a supply and demand, got a lot more people. You can potentially get new access to new customer base or new basically lead generation in a bigger city. Interesting.
Yes.
So I guess then that is a great segue into the advantages of rural practice versus a city practice. What would you say those are in your mind?
I think the advantages are numerous. Like I love the smaller town practice. So as a new graduate, so from my personal experience, I worked in Northern Ontario after working 2 years in GTA. But the confidence, that experience that I gained while working up north was like tenfold than working in GTA.
Really?
I worked in an office that had a bigger team.
Yeah.
So there was an excellent support system. But just the number of patients that I saw on an everyday basis helped me brush my clinical skills and increase the speed, which I think takes you a long way. Just being able to do the procedures efficiently and quickly is very important for the patient comfort level.
Right.
And now when I think about it, even after gaining so many years of experience, I think working in a smaller town is even more rewarding because people value the services that you provide and they value the interpersonal relationships that you have with them. They are not shopping around for the least expensive dentist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's something I feel is a major advantage.
That's it. Yeah. From the business side of it, I would think that there's a lower demand in rural. And so in terms of if you're trying to buy a practice that versus a city practice, that the purchase or the acquisition cost of a practice is much more attractive. Maybe, you could say the word affordable. Is that being your experience if you're looking at big city practices? It's just like personal real estate. Buying a home in downtown Toronto or Manhattan or Miami versus Brampton or Huntsville or somewhere, it's going to be based on population. So was that your experience as well? It was from a business perspective, get a better, faster payback period on your money because the acquisition cost of the practice is lower than comparatively to a big city practice.
I totally agree with that, Irwin. It's definitely much lower. And I think people just want to stay in the cities. So the bidding war just raised the prices so much more.
Interesting.
And so that is like I have some very close friends and we do end up sharing numbers. And just based on those numbers, I think the gap for what initially you invest into a practice is huge.
Really?
Yes. So if that return of investment is something you're looking at, then a rural practice is a way to go.
That's amazing. I think that in terms of your just quality of life, you've got less debt on your mind. Even though it's on your balance sheet, really you carry debt on your mind, don't you? So
that's true. Like even though I have paid far less than what I would have paid in a city, it's still on my mind, and I just don't know what I would have done if I had bought a city practice.
Especially now, right? Like we're today's May 28th and we're in the middle of COVID-19 and folks, everyone's been offline for a couple of months. I think in Ontario, it's been just this week, late last week, where folks can go back, with certain conditions. But imagine having all that overhead on a big city practice. There is some ways to insulate yourself, and I think that one of the advantages or unseen advantages is just your balance sheet. Like how much debt are you taking on? Because we all know that once you're dentist, banks are happy to provide loans. But the question then becomes for yourself as a dentist looking to buy a practice: how much debt do you want to take, and how confident are you that you can sustain demand, and how much can you pad your war chest in terms of cash flow in case something bad happens? The pandemic is crazy. No one could, really expected it was going to be this bad as quickly. But that is a really, I think, a really attractive piece of information when assessing the business pros and cons of
Yes.
practice.
Also, when not just your initial debt, there are multiple other factors like your overhead, the fixed overhead, your rent. Do you want to own a building? Those things. And then the staffing issues. The people in smaller towns they like to keep working in the same place. They like a simple lifestyle. They value those relationships. So it seems that it's harder to find staff in a smaller town. But I think if you are a good employer and your team is happy, then they would stay with you. So that's one advantage. And then other things, as you mentioned, the expenses. And then you're not competing with a corp, or I was just the names. But yes, you're a smaller practice. And if there is another practice, it's another smaller practice. So just having that kind of competition adds on to the stress, especially in times like these, but even when things are normal.
Absolutely. So then it seems like the taking on a rural practice, if you're comfortable with being embedded and seen in the community, you see somebody at the grocery store or shopping or at the park or what have you, if you're comfortable being in the public eye and you're okay being in rural and that fits your lifestyle, are you finding that the population, the insurance, and people's ability to pay in terms of like the revenues, are you finding that you've had to lower prices? Are they at the same, at par? Are people taking on higher margin procedures, more cosmetic procedures in a rural place? What's your experience with the diversity of procedures that you're doing?
Yes. So to give you a little background about that, I have two practices, and both are smaller town, and one is, it's a little different demographics in both. But in one of the practices, we actually do a lot of those specialized procedures like implants and Invisalign. And people want those procedures. It doesn't mean that if they're in a smaller town, people would not. I think that is a misconception that in a smaller town, you'll be doing only drill and fill dentistry. And I have found that that's not true. There is definitely a lot of basic dentistry that is great when you're a new grad, but people do value other procedures. And basically, they value their oral health as much as people in bigger cities would. So I haven't found that to be a big difference. And in my other practice, which I newly acquired, there is a lot of basic procedures, but I have started introducing my implants and things, and people are very interested. They actually asked me, "Can you do it here?" And I was like, "If I say yes," and I think they're very happy about it.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
like that's a game. Like you've got a multiplier effect there happening. Your acquisition cost for rural practice compared to a big city practice is lower. And then the amount of procedures or the revenue per procedure is at same or higher. And so that becomes very attractive on if you're looking at how are you doing month over month or revenue basis comparatively, it gets really exciting. If it can fit your lifestyle, and you're okay, and vice versa. If you want to live in the city and you're okay commuting out, like you commuted 7 hours to rural practice,
yeah.
or maybe you want to still live in the big city and you buy a rural practice city. It depends on certain cities. The traffic might be opposite way. It's a good lifestyle thing.
And yeah, that's true. Like, so I live at a 25-minute drive from my practice. So even if you were in a city, you would be driving that same amount of time. And it's just that I don't get any traffic. But that's also a possibility. Like if you don't want to live in the town, you can always choose another smaller town.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then driving back to the city takes me like less than 2 hours, and I come back to city all the time. So as far
Great.
as that lifestyle choice is concerned, it did not have a major impact. Or even if I like that big city feel, then I could work during the weekdays and then just come back on the weekends. It's very much possible to do it.
Great setup. I think
Mm.
that translates into longevity, and it works against fatigue as well. Like when
Mhm.
you set yourself up that way, that matches your lifestyle. I know today we're talking about rural and small town practices. Either way, even if with a big city practice, if it fits your lifestyle and your working arrangement and what to sustain you, that's what's going to have you be great with your patients, be great with your staff. And so I think that kind of the unseen benefit, or maybe the insight there, is you're happier as the practice principal. And one of the
Mhm.
challenges you had mentioned is maybe staff are harder to come by in a rural city, but at the same time, the staff that you are interacting with, you're also bringing your best self there. You're happier overall.
Mhm.
You've got that, like you said, work-life balance. You have something in the tank: patience, understanding, availability, like even emotional availability for staff.
Mhm.
Because as a small business owner, you're wearing that hat. You're wearing a manager hat as well. And
Mhm.
so really setting up your whole holistically, your life, your at-home life and your lifestyle plus work, I think will allow you to have longevity and really sets you up for success there, even with staffing. So some interesting insight there that I'm getting from what your setup is. That's very, very cool. I guess the next question is, like, what are some misconceptions of owning a rural practice, if any?
I think the misconceptions, one of the things we have already touched on, is that we are going to be doing a lot of basic procedures. And as I said, that's one thing. Like, generally talk to people and they think that you're just doing your, what we say, drill fill dentistry. But that's not true. I have found that people value whatever expertise you have to offer. And if you're able to offer advanced procedures and if you want to learn them and apply those skills, then there is a market for that.
That's amazing. So
So,
it's like really just it sounds like the limit is you, right?
yes,
Whatever, yeah, if you share your practice and what you want to do, there is a market for it in rural towns as well.
that's true. That's very true. Yes.
So did you do any other research before picking up the practice that you did, like on the demographics, on the population, or incomes within household incomes within that city, that rural town?
Yes. So when I was looking at the practices, looking at the appraisal, I would have, it's very important to, just to add on to this, that to have a team of your accountants, your lawyers. It's extremely important to have a team that's expert on these areas. So basically those people who I had, they did help me kind of figure out what the demographics of those places was, and those kind of things. So yes, in the rural area where I am, it's actually the smaller town in Muskoka. We do have a lot of elderly population, but I'm seeing that a lot of younger families are either moving to the area or they're coming to my practice now. I don't know, but yes, it's a mixed practice. But yes, some elderly population there who really need dental work, and they are and they value that. So
That's
yes.
again,
Mhm.
what the common theme with you is due diligence. Spending the time to work 7 hours away and check out a rural practice and confirming, validating that it's for you, and then also having a team in place. So I think let's look at that a little bit. So you said having accountants and lawyers in place, and you had specific accountants that assess or appraise practices. So typically, there's brokers involved, like practice brokers. Um,
Yes.
did you deal with one of those folks, or hire one of those, or did the seller have a practice broker and then your accountant and lawyers reviewed the appraisal?
So the seller had the broker and my accountants reviewed the appraisal. So that's how it worked for me.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and then in terms of when you did take over, was there a period of time where, well, I guess, how did that go? Was the previous dentist there for a long time? Were they retiring?
Yes, he was retiring, but the idea was to just have a transition period for 6 months. That was in my practice number one. So, but I think we decided that I think after 4 months or so, he was basically, yes. So he was there just for 4 months. Like we had a contract for 6 months, but then everything went very smoothly. So I was able to take over after 4 months.
Amazing. And how did again, with the rural population, how did they receive you? Was there any
They were
attrition?
amazing.
Oh, yeah.
No. It was really amazing. I think obviously when a new dentist goes, he had been their dentist for years.
Mhm.
So that expectation, like how the new person is going to be, that's always a question. But if you're doing your job, if you like what you're doing, people will see it. And I didn't have those issues.
That's amazing. I've heard stories where the outgoing dentist doesn't let any of their client base, patient base know. There's no notice. And then one day you book your appointment and then the new dentist shows up or they're surprised. So I love hearing that. Again, maybe it's because it's a rural or a small town that word gets around. People know.
Yes. So there is a tradition like to do a patient letter. And so what we had was that the front desk team would, whenever they were booking the appointments, they would let patients know. And then we had a letter from the outgoing dentist and myself introducing myself, and we would email it to them. And that's how we worked around that. So we tried to minimize the surprises as much as possible. There were still some, but I think they were really minimum from that aspect. Yes.
Wow. Excellent. Can you share any of those minimum or issues that you dealt with?
The minimum issues was not, I think it was not that it was not received well, but we had some patients, for some reason, they did not receive the communication that there has been a change. So most of those patients were, I think, the hygiene patients.
Right.
And
I think sorry, go ahead.
So we didn't have many issues there. No.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out, that there will be, and anytime you're taking over practice, whether it's a big city practice or a rural practice, you're not going to make everyone happy. And some people just love the other person and they're so loyal. They're more loyal with that relationship versus having their dental care being taken care of. And so, yeah, just maintaining a great attitude and doing the best you can with the people that are willing to meet with you and see you. I think that also will help create some momentum and buzz around the practice. So I think that it's great the way you handled it. It turns into a non-issue, as you had mentioned.
Yeah.
So very cool.
I also think, Arvind, that when you go into a new practice, unless there is something definitely very wrong with the practice, it's always a good idea to adapt yourself to the practice a little bit.
Well, so how did you, can you share a little bit about that? Like, how did you adapt to this practice?
So as far as the dental, I initially was working in a different practice. I said it was a very fast-paced, where I was seeing patients every half an hour. And this practice is more like, it is a very personal feel, like, you take your time and all those things. So I had to slow myself down to kind of match the environment, or basically I'm not having that word, whatever the practice culture was.
Got it.
So instead of just coming in and doing my quick check and getting to the work, like I like talking to people, that's just there.
Right.
But then as far as the dentistry is concerned, I just had to slow down my pace. And I think that was one of the skills that I had to learn. And I was very lucky to get an amazing supportive team, and they kind of guided me into it.
Excellent.
So sometimes it's okay to let go of that control and just let other people guide you as well.
So you had mentors, it sounds like.
Yes, my team was a mentor.
Your team,
So,
interesting.
yes,
You
that's
let
what
them mentor, like
yes.
mentor up, like what I call like you're managing up. You let them
Yeah.
coach,
Yes. So
guide
it was the
you.
other way, right? They
Very
would like,
cool.
yeah, I just like, we would sit and we would discuss the things that I was doing differently and that did not happen in the practice before, starting from a new patient exam or the way the things were being done. And I found the system was awesome. Like I had to follow that system and I just made myself a part of it. So sometimes it's a better idea to just sit back and listen to what your team has to offer. And then if you eventually don't like it, changes can always be gradually made. So that's, I think, something that I have learned or realized.
That's very
Yeah.
insightful. Very cool. We talk to dentists all the time, and one of the misconceptions is that the principal dentist wants to put their expression, the term I use, their expression of dentistry on that practice. And here's how I, as the dentist, envision it. Here's how I think that this all looks. But when unless you're building it from scratch, completely ground zero, and you're taking over a previous book of business, for you to be savvy and have, it sounds like, no ego around it, and come in there and be a student of the practice, student of the culture, and learn and observe and take what's good versus completely resetting.
Yeah.
I think that is such a great attitude and way to be. And also, again, coming from a business standpoint, from a humanity standpoint, it's great. Your staff feel like they're part of it. You assimilate with the culture of the community much quicker. But equally, from the business standpoint, you are presumably driving more revenue. There's less of a hiccup as the transition happens. You're getting valuable, productive chair time out of it. So I think that is just a real smart way to go about it. And I think this applies to both rural, like any practice, regardless.
Any practice. I think it's always like, I have never been a know-it-all person. And I would ask questions to my team. I would say, like, if I make mistake, let me know. I think that's how it should be. And even if you want to make changes, there is always time for it, but don't do it right away.
Right. I think that, like, if we look at big organizations, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, there's a specific process for change management that people go through, and there's a way to do it. And I think one of the things from my experience is like listening to folks and the people that are doing the job right now. You align with them, you find your allies within that group, you become a member of that tribe before you completely cut everything out. I think that is such a smart way to work and helped your transition. I think that, again, for you to say that there was minimal things that happened, some folks listening could say, well, she's not really saying much about it. I'm sure it can't be that easy. However, when we're scratching the surface here and you're saying that also your attitude and your approach is you're asking the questions and you're being observant of how is it currently run. You get your staff to buy into you being the new principal dentist. You get your staff to contribute to your learning that, hey, this is how we're doing it, and let them feel that they're valued by you. And then they also have a place here, because I'm sure it's going to be stressful for them too.
Definitely. I think they were even more stressed out than I was. So
for sure. Oh yeah.
And we need to understand that, yes, you're a business owner, you have taken over this, but it is their practice. It's their home as well. They have been working there for years. So as I said, that I'm not saying that all teams would be as great. Maybe I was just lucky. But just, I guess, initially observing it and seeing how your team is doing is not a bad idea.
Yeah. That's awesome. Dr. Chauhan, I know it's super busy, and especially with the COVID-19 rules relaxing a little bit and practices opening back up. I am super grateful for your time today that you get to share your experience. And I love the passion that you bring to owning and operating a rural practice and sharing a little bit about your journey on how you got there.
Mhm.
Super thankful for that. If people want to reach out or get connected to you, how can they reach out to you, or how can they connect with you?
Yeah, sure. They can send me an email, and I think that's the best way to
Yeah,
reach out.
I'll
Yeah,
put
yeah,
the email in the show notes,
yeah.
and we'll put in also maybe any other social media handles that you'd like to share. We'll put that in the show notes, and yeah,
Yes, I just because I'm not a great social media person sometimes. So you can always put out my personal Facebook page
great.
there. And I don't mind, like, if they want to send me a text message, that's fine too. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Dr. Chauhan, thank you so much for your time today. And folks listening, thanks so much. Hope you got a lot of value out of this and some insights in terms of owning, operating your own rural practice and why you'd consider a rural practice if you haven't considered it before. Thanks again for listening to the Practice Accelerator podcast.
Thank you so much, Irvin. Thanks for that.